Welcome back and thank you so much for joining me in today's video because I have a big update for you guys because existing home sales on a national level have plunged to the slowest sales pace since August of 2010. On top of that, home sales on a national level have now decreased for 19 out of the past 21 months. Meanwhile, even though home sold prices are up compared to 12 months ago, they have now fallen for the past 4 months in a row. This is based on my own analysis of the latest report from the National Association of Realtors. And of course, in today's video, I'll share all the details. And by the way, a lot of research goes into making this a monthly video for you guys. So if you guys get any value out of this video whatsoever, then please hit the like button. I greatly appreciate that. Also consider subscribing as well because I post frequent housing market updates so you guys can make a more informed decision about whether to buy or sell a house right now. With that said, let's begin today's video. I appreciate you. So here's the latest report from NAR here, just posted on November 21st here. It says among the 4 major US regions, home sales decreased in the Northeast, the South, and the West, but were unchanged in the Midwest. All 4 major regions experienced decreases in home sales on a year-over-year basis. And here's a look at that right here. This is seasonally adjusted and also annualized as well. So the current sales pace is just under 3.8 million, down 4.1% from September, and also down from 1 year ago, down by about 15%. But all 4 of these major regions here decreased both on a month-to-month as well as a year-over-year basis, except for the Midwest, a flat compared to September, but still down compared to 1 year ago. Also, the biggest decrease month to month was actually located in the South, down by 7.1%, whereas the Northeast saw the biggest decreases on a year-over-year basis. Also, something worth mentioning as well is that on a national level at 3.79 million, this was below the forecast overall at 3.9 million. Okay, let's get nerdy here and talk about my own analysis of their data here. So the National Association of Realtors data is this right here, only the date and of course the sales pace, which again is seasonally adjusted and of course annualized as well. So for the month of October, we're at 3.79 million. That again was below expectations of 3.9 million. On top of that, this slowest sales pace going back to August of 2010. Therefore, a new 13-year low. By the way, September was the previous 13-year low. So in my personal opinion here, home sales remain very low due to limited housing inventory and elevated rates. Looking forward here, rates decreased somewhat in November, down by about 60 basis points from the 8% rates we saw back in late October, but still remain very much elevated. But looking forward here, rates decreased in November and inventory has been rising, highly unusual. So that could fuel demand to a certain degree. However, I expect home sales to remain relatively low due to the combination effect of high rates, still high rates, and of course, high home prices as well. Also, something to keep in mind here as well, when looking at anything that has to do with a close home sale for a particular month, in this case, October, that's really what our housing market was like approximately 1 to 2 months ago when the home buyer got their offer accepted by the home seller. So for example, as I note right here, closed sales in October were mostly for signed purchase contracts in August when the average 30-year fixed rate for people with great credit, according to Freddie Mac, on average for the entire month of August was at 7.07%. Then an increase in September to 7.2%. I mention this because November sales will likely be lower because rates surged to 7.62% on average for the month of October. But also, like I mentioned, because rates decrease in November, that could cause home sales to rise slightly in December and potentially in January. And keep in mind, this is all based on a seasonally adjusted annualized rate here. Okay, let's also have a look at the home sales pace compared to 1 year ago. Again, down by 14.6%. Based on my analysis here, this is actually the smallest annual decrease since June of 2022. Back then, we saw a decrease of 14.1%. Also, it's not nearly as bad as the 28.3% decrease we saw in October of 2022. Now we're only down by 14.6%. So big picture here, the year-over-year changes are actually improving because the market fell big time in late 2022, and the sales pace at that time last year was already at very low levels. Okay, let's change gears slightly here and talk about home prices. And by the way, in today's video, when I mention home prices, I mean the median sold price nationwide. So nationwide, we're at $391,800. That's actually a decrease from September's $392,800. That was actually revised down. The report from 1 month ago stated that the median sold price was at $394,000. But if you guys just Google home prices, home sales today, you'll see it's all over the net that home prices are surging. However, it's down compared to last month. And I'll share some more stats regarding that and also historical levels going back to 2010 here very, very soon. So they also looked at the 4 major US regions here as well. The biggest increase was actually in the Northeast, an increase of 7.5% from October of 2022, whereas the West saw the smallest gain of 2.3%. And again, a friendly reminder here, these numbers here of home prices are not seasonally adjusted. So let's look at my own analysis of what's happening right now. So again, we're at $391,800. That is actually a 6-month low, which again is seasonal because during the last half of the year, home sold prices tend to decrease. Now, here's something you guys should be aware of though, is that home sold prices have now decreased for 4 consecutive months. Again, that is seasonal, but for comparison's sake, home prices fell by 1.2% back in October last year compared to last September. This year, we're seeing a decrease of 0.3%. So therefore, home prices were falling faster at this time last year. This is actually different than what I reported back in September though. So back in September, home prices fell by 2.8% compared to August, whereas last year it fell by 2.1%. So in September this year, home prices fell faster compared to 1 year ago. Now it's exactly the opposite. We're down by 0.3% this month compared to a 1.2% decrease from 12 months ago. I also did some digging for you guys as well, because when looking at the average September through October change going back to the year of 2010, on average, we saw a decrease of 0.7%. This year, a decrease of 0.3%. So this decline we're seeing on a month-to-month basis this October is not as bad as historical averages. In contrast, when looking at year-over-year changes, historically speaking, we saw a gain of 6.4% going back to 2010 compared to a 3.4% gain this year. Now, speaking of that, this gain of 3.4% year over year marks the 4th consecutive yearly increase. It's also quite the turnaround from the 3% decrease we saw just 5 months ago. So back in May 2023, home prices fell by 3% compared to May 2022. Now we're actually up by 3.4%. So the year-over-year changes are actually improving due to the fact that home prices fell much faster in the late summer months last year compared to this year. However, though, the year-over-year gain is less than the average going back to 2010, as I described already, 6.4 compared to 3.4%. Here's something worth noting here as well, because the peak to trough, which was last year's correction, the all-time record high nationwide was set back in June of 2022. Back then, we're around $413,800. Compare that to the trough, which was January this year, home prices fell by 12.7%. This year, though, this is the gain in prices from January through October this year, a pretty big increase of 8.5%. So because prices increased by 8.5% this year, that's why we're only down by 5.3% compared to last year's peak. from 414,000 to about 392,000. But wait, there's more, because I also want to discuss the changes in prices compared to the past several years here. So the increase in home sold prices compared to 2 years ago is an increase of 10%. Going back to October of 2020, they're up by 25% compared to pre-pandemic levels, up by 45% compared to October of 2019, and a giant increase of 54% compared to 2018. Also, just for fun, looking at the change from October 08 through October of 2009, home sold prices decreased by 8%. All right, let's get back to the National Association of Realtors press release here. It says total housing inventory, which, by the way, I believe they include pending home sales on top of active listings or the houses actually for sale. That's why this number of 1.15 million is much higher compared to other websites such as Realtor.com and AltosResearch.com. Anyways, that's an increase of 1.8% from last month, but down 5.7% compared to 1 year ago. Meanwhile, the month supply is at 3.6 months at the current sales pace, up from 3.4 months last month and up from 3.3 months that was set back in October of 2022. We already talked about home prices, and let's also talk about days in the market. So the median days in the market is at 23 days in October. Again, that's a time frame when you list your house for sale until you accept an offer from a home buyer. And that's up from 21 days in September and also from 12 months ago as well. Meanwhile, 66% of all houses that sold in October were on the market for less than 1 month. First-time home buyers made up 28% of all home sales in October, up from 27% in September, but still flat from 1 year ago. All cash sales, 29%. So 3 of every 10 closed home sales in October were from a cash buyer based on their survey here. And that, by the way, is up from the 26% we saw 12 months ago. Meanwhile, individual investors or second home buyers, who make up, of course, many cash sales, purchased 15% of all houses in October, down from 18% last month, and also down slightly from the 16% we saw 1 year ago. Also, distressed home sales, which is defined by a foreclosure or a short sale, only represented 2% of all home sales. That is identical compared to last month and also from 1 year ago as well. Also, according to the National Association of Realtors, here's a look at home sales by region this October. So 45% of all home sales of existing houses. Today's video is only looking at existing home sales, excluding multifamily and, of course, brand new home construction. So 45% came from the South, 24% in the Midwest, and the rest came from these other two regions here. Something I found to be interesting here is that the vast majority of all closed home sales in October were in the range of 250,000 to 500,000. That was at 45%. Whereas houses that sold for over $1 million was only at 7%. Just for comparison's sake, the California Association of Realtors just reported a few days ago that about 30% of all closed home sales in October were for over $1 million, whereas on a national level, that percentage or that share is only at 7%. And with that said, please comment below with your biggest takeaways from today's video. Also, if you guys got any value out of this video whatsoever, then please hit the like button. I greatly appreciate that. Of course, I appreciate you. Like and subscribe. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you in the next video.